morning, everyone. I hope that you all could find the places. I am very, very happy that the session is popular and crowded, so thanks very much for joining us. I'd like to introduce myself and the panel and the topic. My name is Edith Herzog, and I am chairing the widening group within the science business community, building the network of the widening countries. Besides, I'm a senior advisor for GEANT. GEANT is interconnecting 110 countries across the world. So whoever used the EduROM is connected to the rest of the researchers across all those countries. And maybe I can announce one data here that we have a new achievement that in last year, 7.5 billion people identified themselves in the EduROM network, which meant that they were somewhere else than the local national country. Yeah, so this is very, very global and local in the same time. And we discuss here the future. Yeah, we are going back to the future because in the different panels and the different plenary sessions, we discussed that how the FP10 must be spent for few players or for more players. And now we discuss here that how big is Europe. As you can see here, we have a speakers in the panel from Portugal, which is one end of the Europe, and we have the Western Balkan on the other end, coming Anastas from Skopje. So besides the widening, we have in the FP10, in the time of FP10, the very big new challenge, which means the enlargement. Yeah, there are countries who are waiting for enlargement for quite a while in the Western Balkan. And there are countries who were just promised in the last European Council to be the member of the European Union by maybe 2030. It means that the European Union territory compared to the 20 years ago, when the Big Bang happened and the 10 new countries joined, will triple. And by population, the half of the population will be outside of the 15 original countries who are the core members of the European Union, as we still saying, the West versus the East. So it's a time to discuss that what does it mean for us, how the FP10 program can anticipate the changes of the enlargement, what those countries have to do. They have to wait for the next coming framework program until the 11th, or do we do something for them already in the FP10? So how we can combine the very top political priority to get the enlargement happen, and that the researchers in that region can come to participate in our project. So I'd like to introduce the panel. I'm very happy to welcome Jean-Pierre Bourguignon, who is the theoretical mathematician. We all know him in the Brussels bubble. He, among many things, and being a mathematician, he is a very committed European. He was the president of the ERC for six years between 2014 and 21. So Jean-Pierre, very much coming that you are with us. Today he is yet active working in the IHES, the Institute of High Ecole Studies. You might say something about it. Then next to him we have Anastas Mishev. Anastas Mishev is a computer science researcher in the North Macedonia University of Method and Cyril. And as I said, he's a computer researcher, and of course, he's coming from the Western Balkan, from the country where they are waiting for the enlargement for quite a while, and they are already prepared for the enlargement. Then we have Monika Dietl. Monika is also a well-known figure for the people who are standing for research here in Brussels bubble. Monika she's Spanish, but she spent the time in the CNRS as a director. Then she was the director of the COST. We all know COST. Of course, and recently, in the recent past years, she is in the initiative of Science for Europe. They are doing many things. I think that you, Monika, you will say it yourself. Then I am very happy to welcome Marina Di Giorgi. Marina Di Giorgi is the coordinator of the Southeast Cooperation regarding interconnectivity. She is representative of GEANT. And then we have the 40 years most experience with the FP program, José Caldeira from INESC from Portugal, who has the experience that and who can tell us how we have to be patient to wait because Portugal joined to the European Union in 1985, still a member of the widening group with a great progress. So I think that it's also very good to look back to the past and in front of the future, what we are going to do with those countries. So that would be my question, and I'd like to ask with Jean-Pierre, because Jean-Pierre, I think it's very, very important that how you see it from your position, being a French, being in ERC, being in a Pillar 1, the issue. The last thing I'd like to say, that these people are very different, but they are very common. First of all, they stand for research, but we know that. But all of them, I know them personally, all of them are truly, truly Europeans. I think that it's important to start. So Jean-Pierre, as a truly European, what do you think?
Thank you for the presentation. I don't think it's working.
Yes, it does.
No, it works? Okay, very good. Thank you for the presentation and the opportunity to say something about this question of rethinking the next framework program. Actually, there are three different things I would like to say. Really, for research, what makes difference are people. So for many countries which are going to join the Union, I think one of their main issues, and presently I'm involved in helping Ukrainian colleagues to set up a math institute in Ukraine, is making sure that the next generation is not leaving the country, is not going elsewhere. And this is happening a lot in many of the Central and Eastern European countries. And of course, you cannot develop high-level research if your young generation is leaving. So that's the first issue I think we need to keep in mind. One of the functions of the framework program as to create conditions for the generation to feel that it is worthwhile to stay in their own country. And to stay means sometimes being part-time there, part-time elsewhere. But for sure, this is one issue. The second issue has to do with the fact that Europe, of course, has a framework program, but there are also countries which are associated with the framework program. As you know, there's been big discussion with the UK and with Switzerland and so on. But many of the countries which will become members of the European Union have been associated with the framework program for a number of years. Very often, it didn't mean very large amounts of money coming there, but still there were definite possibilities for Europe to finance research in countries which were associated, even if they were not members. And my last point is also very much connected to what is the situation of the support to research in the countries. And there is a huge disparity. And of course, as you know, the target for the European Union was to reach in 2020 3% of GDP to be spent. Totally missed. The average at the moment is at 2.2, 2.28 exactly. And my own country, France, is at 2.24, so not even in the European average. So good grade for France. And typically the countries which were leading were definitely the Nordic countries for a number of years. But now you probably don't know that the country which is spending in Europe among the member states most money on research is Belgium, 3.4. So you see, things change. It means also that some of the northern countries have been spending slightly less money than they used to. But the competition is different. China now is above the European average, 2.4 now, and growing very fast. I always take a joke discussing with the head of the Chinese NSF at some point when I rejoined the ERC, who was complaining that, well, he was not happy because his next budget will grow by 21%. So that was his situation. So you see, this is the situation. China going up extremely quickly, but also other countries. Israel is at 4.3, and South Korea is at 4.4. So you see, this is the landscape for Europe. And of course, for the countries which are going to join the European Union very soon, or even countries who have joined the European Union very soon, the amount of money spent on research is very, very low. Romania at the moment is 0.5, and you see the target is 3%. So of course, the way you can support these very different countries has to take into account everything I said. Create conditions for younger people to stay, improve the financing, And for example, for the moment, the percentage of the support of research in countries, if you put it between European source and national source, the ratio are very, very different. For Germany, it's not even 2%. It's not even at level 2. In the case of Romania, it's 5 times more. So you see, this is another way in which Europe can impact, which is comparing to the share of the amount of money available at national level. So these huge differences need to be overcome. And clearly, one size fits all is not going to solve the problem because the problems in different countries are different.
Thanks, Jean-Pierre. So that one doesn't fit for all, and there is a homework in each single European country being associated or not. So how it's seen from the region? Anastas, how you see it from the region?
Thank you, Edith. It's a pleasure to be here. I would like to reflect a little bit on the history of what's been happening with the FP programs in the region, especially in the area of infrastructures, because that's my field of interest mostly. And we believe that the infrastructures are crucial for retaining the talents back in the country instead of going away into the more developed parts of Europe or worldwide. More than 20 years ago, with the support of FP5, it all started with the basic building blocks, the networking. With the support of, at that time, Dante and Terena, some member countries, and lots of Western Balkan and Southeast European countries, even some Eastern Partnership countries started working together. And as a result of it, almost all of these countries have established national research and education networks that are part of the big GEAN family today. Marina will speak a little bit more on this. Then FP6 and FP7 helped us establish the high throughput computing, the grid computing infrastructure. Again, through a series of regional projects funded by FP6 and FP7, we managed to catch up, managed to join the European Grid Initiative. Further on, the story continues with the Horizon that helped us, with the FP7 that helped us build the human and technical capacity for HPC, resulting again in most of the countries from the region being now part of the Euro HPC joint undertaking, not without challenges that I mentioned yesterday on the international session, of course. And then Horizon helped us develop the virtual research environment, and most importantly, develop the awareness of fair data and EOSC in general. As a result, all the countries in the region, as a result of a very successful regional project, the NIFOS Europe project, which was a very interesting project. Out of 15 countries, 8 non-members and 7 members, helped us develop the potential, develop the policies, develop the national open science cloud initiatives, and most of the institutions are now part of, from the region. A lot of institutions from our region are part of the EOSC now. So we have a strong history of working together at the region with the support of the FP program so far. And we would like to see it continue this way. We believe that being small countries, being on the edge of Europe, being on the doorstep of Europe, we work closely together well. We perform well. One of the highlights of NIFOS review was that they had 0 comments to the consortium. Most of the comments were to the association. Look what they did with the National Open Science Initiatives and apply it Europe-wide. So we have a proven track record of working together with the support of the framework program. So we hope that, of course, our biggest hope is joining in. Our biggest hope is becoming part of the union. I don't know if it depends on people with the provenance like here, the scientists and researchers. It's mostly the others. But until then, it will be important for us to be asked, to be part of what's planning, to be part of what's happened what will happen in the framework 10, to have our say, and not to be outsiders waiting to join like it was with all the previous programs. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Monica, if you don't mind, I'd like to ask Marina to complement, because connect has a meaning that you connect two things. Yeah? So in this case, the connection is made from the existing European network towards the new countries. So how is the other end? And you are coordinator for the Southeast Cooperation.
Yes, it is the Southeast European Forum, we call it. It's basically a platform of directors from the region. We call it the National Research and Education Network. Basically, these are the organization, the partner organization we have at GEANT that run the network that we built over 30 years, going from 11 only connection up to 42 countries connected now. They run the network in country, and they have the capable hands, so the expert, basically, to make it work for the end user, which are the researcher, probably some of you. The network is probably, you heard earlier as well from Edith, is the EduRoam. So it's really the Wi-Fi in research institution and university. So your question was like what do you want?
About that, how to put into the FP10 the enlargement country.
How do we see it? So it's an interesting question for me, because you said reflect on the title. We don't call it enlargement. I mean, we connect research and education communities in Europe. And really, we have like global partnership as well. So basically, we connect 50 million users, wherever they are, if they are scientists. And also, the education now is a big part in our job. So the in country, they are also connecting schools, we see, like especially Croatia, for example, and Serbia. They've been running this project also in their country. So how do we see it? We come together to the Southeast European Directors Forum exactly to address the regional challenges that needs really mutual efforts. What I keep hearing from the directors is basically two things. One is the harmonization of funding to keep it like the region needs to build on the technical capabilities. Now we bridge the digital divide. The infrastructure is there. The network is great for the next 10 years, most probably, right? Yeah. And it seems like that the researchers as well, they're happy with the service available, but how to keep it there, how to actually work in a way that there is no brain drain, as we call it, right? So the experts are still working with the organization, serving the research and education community in country, and connecting with the pan-European global network that GEANT provides. That's pretty much what
Thank you so
would be.
much. So I'd like you to remember that in the region, the research infrastructure and the open science is advancing, and time to time advancing faster than in some of the older European countries or regions. So they are absolutely ready to join. But they all connect, not entities and not machines, but first of all communities. And here where I'd like to turn to Monica, because Monica is the ambassador or the evangelist of the people who are the end users who are to be connected. It's very often we forget that any infrastructure we build, research infrastructure, lab, library, whatever, it's all about to make it easier for the researcher, yeah, to make it easier for the talent. So Monica, you are really evangelist. What do you say about this?
It's a new title. I just want to thank you, Edith. Yeah, well, so I will change a little bit the order of the things I wanted to say. That I will start with, at the time where I was director of cost, I was always saying if it was not the slogan of Nokia, I will take it for cost, which is about connecting people, if you remember. For those who remember, that was the slogan of Nokia. Yes, ultimately it's about connecting people, but to connect people, of course, you need infrastructures, you need data exchanges, and so on. And of course, you need good conditions. Jean-Pierre said it, you need good conditions wherever you are doing your research. So, and the idea is, yes, we need a framework program. I'm saying that because some people were questioning this yesterday. We need a framework program. Anyway, it is in the treaty. But the framework program should focus and fund research and development, as it's not something else, and not other activities. This can be funded by other programs of the European Union. I'm saying that because on the widening, some countries are now pleading for externalizing, putting out of the framework program the widening aspects. And sorry, the widening activities in research should still be funded by the future framework program. The question is, should it continue to be called widening? Should it be called differently? Should it have dedicated programs with very little budget where in fact you cannot do a lot of things? Of course you can have some benefit. I know that Portugal has really well used the widening programs. I know this from Manuel Heitor, which by the way, I'm happy to say that I'm happy he is the chair of the high-level group who will be evaluating the framework program because of his knowledge and his wide view. I close this bracket. So it's about funding research wherever it is, funding. Of course, the second aspect is funding the very best breakthrough ideas. I avoid using the word excellence because this is deviating the attention all the time from the idea that also in those widening countries we have outstanding, excellent brains. And that the idea, and Jean-Pierre said it too, is not always of putting these people elsewhere where the good conditions exist so they can express their excellence or their talents, but to help them to stay, because not everybody is willing to quit his or her country or family or whatever conditions. Some people need or want to stay where they are. So we need to create a fair European research area. I think this is the challenge of the next framework program, how to create conditions for a fair European research areas. That means also to give the opportunity and the means for everybody, wherever he or she is, to get access to the whole framework program and not only to the small budget dedicated to widening. So we are working at Initiative for Science in Europe at a report, which is now we are working a long time because it's a challenge to give really practical, feasible ideas on how to put in place conditions that help those researchers to get access like any other in a better, richer country where there is a percentage much higher than in their own countries. Of course, you mentioned it, Edith, at the beginning. It's also about those member states or future member states to take responsibility on their own research landscape. I mean, it cannot only be Europe who is funding or helping to get a better level. So there are cohesion funds. They can have access and use those funds to build capacity, to build the infrastructures and so on. But funding research is not in that other programs. So that's about rethinking a little bit how and what we do. And of course, it's a very, very too much used word is simplification. But facilitating the access is also simplifying the program, simplifying the rules, and simplifying the submission. And that applies also for another aspect which has been discussed at this conference, which is why do companies not apply enough at the framework program? They also say it's complex. So what about companies in widening countries? So we need to have a wider reflection about how we take up this challenge, because otherwise Europe will create something very lacking symmetry. Well, English is not my best language. And it is about all together doing the job. So taking the best ideas, the best people all over Europe. Thank you.
Thank you, Monica. So I turn to you, yeah, because I think that Portugal has a lesson, yeah. You joined to the European Union in '85, and you are kind of progressing. And whenever I speak to the Portuguese, one word I listen that you need a patience and you need a continuity. Yeah, it's not you do it once and then it's all done. Yeah, there is a continuity need to progress. Jose.
Well, good morning. Thanks for the invitation. It's a pleasure to be here also. Well, I think we are a lesson in some things for good things and in some others not for so good things. But let's try to focus first on the good things. Well, I could say I made the previous words my speech because I touched basically the things that I think are more important. So I try to go a little bit more in detail from our experience. Let me start by saying that I hope that today this speech that we heard, or trends that we heard 10 years ago or 20 years ago that, to ensure the future of Europe, we just need to deal with half a dozen countries, and by the way, half a dozen sectors, and then the rest will follow. I think that we hope that this is past now, and that we understand that we really need all Europe to ensure our future. And for me, the statement of leaving no one behind is not out of solidarity, but is actually a need for survival. So we have to make sure that we develop in all Europe and not only some areas and hoping that ones will follow. So under this statement, I think it's very important that we look to the less developed regions and we see how can we ensure this pathway for, not for excellence, but for development. And I think in that sense, the first level is, of course, capacity building. Because if the entities from the region are not ready, for example, to participate in European research networks or projects, whatever, there's no point to bring them there because they are not prepared. So the capacity building is always the first stage. And of course here, infrastructures, scientific infrastructures, communication infrastructures, basic education and training, all these kind of things, plus a program like the widening program, I think it's very, very important. And in my opinion, should be kept, as it was mentioned. And by the way, for the new regions, the coming regions, we should keep the same level of funding, the same conditions of funding like we had to the previous ones, like Portugal, because otherwise I don't think it would be fair with these new regions if we start changing the rules. So then we will have entities in the region, maybe universities. Of course, we have here a lot of universities and research centers, but I always remember, also companies, because otherwise and stakeholders, otherwise we will not have an economic impact. It will be much harder. And so we will have, as it was mentioned, we will have organizations in those countries that are excellent at the level of being able to participate like any other entities in more developed regions. And as it was mentioned in the morning, we can have excellent research in applied research and very bad research in basic research. Here I would say we can have very good research organizations in less developed countries. They exist. And we can have not so good research organizations in developed countries. So it's a question really of capacity of these organizations. And when we reach this level, and for example in Portugal, I think we did this very well. But when we reach this level, then the next level, which is the jump for the development of the ecosystems and the link, really link to the European programs, then it's a kind of a gap. And here I think that we have some difficulties, not in Portugal, but in several countries. And what we did in the last years, and I think that has an impact, was to understand that after this level of capacitation, the best way to promote convergence is not to continue working at national, regional level with experts coming from the outside. It's actually bringing our organizations to the European level and working and collaborating and competing with the best ones. So what we should do after the capacitation is actually support our organizations to have a bigger role in the European program, in the European Framework Program, and the international networks. What we did, for example, of course, in our case, we are very much dependent on structural funds, and I will make the link to the structural funds. On this upstream, let's say, part, we, for example, for about 4 years, I was in the National Innovation Agency. In that period, in the previous framework program, that period, we were able to use structural funds. I think we were the first country in Europe to use structural funds to ensure the seal of excellence mechanism, which is a kind of a downstream, using what we do at European level to benefit our regions, but also a bit more difficult to use structural funds to support the national contributions for co-fund programs like Eureka and Eurostars. And this was rather difficult. We're talking about 9 years ago, so it was rather difficult. Some people say it was impossible, but we did it. And this allowed us to support with national funds the participation of our organizations, both research organizations and companies, in the European programs. Now, what I think what is the next step now is, as you know, the Commission has done very important steps towards the synergies part. And now it's possible with national programs, with national funds, with structural funds, to support a bigger participation of the national and regional entities into the European programs. And I think regions and countries should use this opportunity to support their participation of their entities in these European programs as a mean of convergence. And this is always a big fight, a big discussion, because they say, well, European programs is excellence, structural funds is convergence, so don't mix it. And I say, no. After capacitation, the best way to promote convergence is actually participating also at European program. So it makes sense for me to use structural funds to support the participation of our entities in the structural funds. And the other way around is how these regions can benefit from the results of the European projects. We developed at European level, we developed a lot of what we call key enabling technologies. So technologies that are very cross-sectorial. So for example, in the European program, we developed them and we apply them to the automotive sector. But these technologies have potential to be applied in textile, in shoes, in furniture, in metalworking. So if the regions, if the countries, the less developed countries can have access to these results, and with using their national regional funding, support what we call the cross-fertilization and further valorization of these results and bring them to their sectors, the sectors that are important for them. This is also a very big contribution, not only in the connection with the European level, but also in taking value and benefiting from the outcome of the European programs. So these are just two examples. And again, we had some programs, some instruments in Portugal to support precisely this cross-fertilization and further exploitation of results of European programs. So these are two examples that I'm giving you, how we go from the capacitation level to the more developed level, and because this is a gap that still for some countries and that I know are still difficult to jump. But in any case, what I can tell you is that making this effort from the countries, and even from the less developed countries and regions, it pays off. It takes time. It's not simple. It's not easy. It takes time. It takes time to move the mentalities of the researchers. It takes time to move the mentalities of the companies. It takes time to, for example, to develop the ecosystems. Very small companies, SMEs, it's very difficult for them to actively participate in the discussions at European level. But for example, cluster organizations, they represent them, they can do that for them and then spread the message. So we need to build these ecosystems at national regional level. But if we do that gradually, then we are on the right pathway to be able to have of course, to develop our innovation ecosystem, to increase our investment in R&D, because public side can spend money. The private side, they don't spend money, they invest money. So they need to have a way of seeing that there is a return on this investment. But if we do that, we are building the pathway to make sure that this pays off as an economic and social impact, and that we prepared ourselves to be more active at European level. So that's a bit my story. Then, of course, we can go more in detail if needed with more concrete examples. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'd like to pick up one thing which you have said, and I think it's a very big question for the FP10, that do we have the region as a nice to have, or do we have a region as they are coming here begging to participate, or do we look them that it's a necessity for European survival? You used the very harsh word survival, and therefore they cannot be left behind. So it's coming back to my original question, question and the discussion in this panel, that what we can do to build the new countries, both the widening and the newly entering many countries, the Western Balkan, Moldova, and Ukraine, and maybe some other countries, before 2030, so in quite a short framework, how we can do it in the FP10. Do we need more money? Do we need to get the arguments that why we need the 200 billion euro, why we have to increase the purse, or how we insert those countries and those needs? I think that this is my second question, and I'd like to ask the audience if you have any. So very short, please, because we have 15 minutes left.
Yeah. Can I?
Yes.
Yes, on the budget, this was discussed also in an earlier panel today. Of course, we need more budget. And the more countries there are, the more budget we need. But if there was a kind of guideline to be used, from my point of view, is we know that currently many of excellent evaluated projects are not funded. The ERC is a big example, but also Marie Curie and many other, I think most programs. The figure of 2 to 4% success rate in some programs, everybody knows. So the guideline should be to be able to fund all the very well ranked projects all over the framework. So that would be quite, I didn't calculate, but maybe a mathematician would do it better than me, what this would represent. But clearly we need for the ERC, for Marie Curie, for the infrastructures, for everything, in fact, and for collaborative research, which stays a very important part at large, I mean, partners, including partnerships and so on. We need really to be able to fund the best, and maybe even a bit more than the best, because it's not an exact science, the evaluation, and we might pass through very excellent or very good ideas, breakthrough ideas, which can be a win situation. And in fact, we lack the opportunity because we didn't have enough budget or enough audacity to say we can fund more, because there might be one just behind, which still is an excellent idea or an excellent team or an excellent university or ensemble of universities. So I think it's really important that we have a fair calculation again there of what the need is to fund the best research in Europe.
Okay, who wishes to be the next?
I'm willing to say something because actually part of the support of research is also coming from the structural funds, as you very rightly said. And actually, Carlos Moedas, who was commissioner during my time, thought a lot, introduced in particular the Seal of Excellence, which I think was a very good way of using this money from structural funds. The main difficulty which occurred, and I personally spent quite some time on this issue, is that basically the conditions that the services from the Commission, from DG Regio were putting, were basically by definition antagonistic to research, because they wanted to have an impact in 3 years on employment. How come could you imagine that if you invest on structural funds in research, you will have a return on employment in 3 years? It doesn't make any sense. And of course, so it means that if you are serious about having a significant part of the structural funds, and it could go up to 30% actually, and I'm sure countries like Portugal managed to do that well, you need also the rules to check that the money has been properly used changed, because it has to be adapted to the purpose. My second point has to do also again with people, because in many countries, and in particular in the new member states or even countries which joined recently, one of the efforts which had been made, which was very reasonable, was to increase the number of students. But many countries, the number of students has grown very significantly, but not the number of professors, with the result that the teaching load of people has grown tremendously. How can you top research work if you are teaching so many hours a week? And actually, I know even some colleagues who really had difficulty with their salaries because salaries were very low, who actually decide not to teach more, but take another job elsewhere, even driving an ambulance at night, because they felt it was less disruptive than having to prepare many hours of teaching. So I think it's very, very important to understand that even if your purpose is to improve the quality of the research, the impact of the research, you have to make sure that, in particular, because capacity building is so important, that you know that you have to fund capacity building well. And typically, maybe the structural funds can help, but then the rule of the game has to be changed. And therefore, you have to agree that if there is it's very normal for structural funds that you look for an impact, but the horizon of the impact should be compatible with the kind of support you bring. So all these changes, which are in a sense almost cultural changes for some services of the Commission, I remember a very tough discussion, people in DG Regio on this, because they said, no, but here is my rule, and I don't want to, I cannot change my mandate, it's like this. So I think these are also other conditions, which is not just money. Of course, money is an issue, but there are more. It's more than money. It's having a consistent approach when you finance something with the goal and the capacity of the project that you are supporting, the impact that the project you are supporting will have in the future, and what is a reasonable measure for this impact.
Thanks you very much, Jean-Pierre, to mentioning the professors and the teachers. If you have time, just last week the European Parliament organized a debate in the plenary about the teachers across Europe, that how the teacher sector is kind of underlooked. It's very national member state policy driven, And on the other side, we see the scarcity of talent, not only in the research and education, but also in the high tech, also in the deep tech, also in biology, in any kind of industry. Yeah? So there is a disconnect between the. So thanks very much to say that. So you are coming. You wished what you wished for FP10.
Well, being outside of the club on the doorstep waiting to get in, we cannot say much about the budget. What we can say is that we are heavily dependent on the funding that was provided by the FP. Keep in mind that some of the countries down there in the associated countries have a budget for science that is maybe an order of magnitude less than the lowest European one. So we are heavily dependent on this funding, and we will be more than happy to continue it. I completely agree with the changes in the evaluation, changes in the pursuit of science, not only the excellent science, but a more involvement, a more wider acceptance of the proposals. To avoid that we call the two-speed Europe. We would like to avoid having a Europe that moves, part of Europe moving very fast and part of Europe lacking behind and always trying to catch up. It's time to change this, to make it more involving for all of us. And I didn't want even to start on the teachers. My other professor had. I don't want even to start the discussion about the teachers.
Thanks very much, Anastasia. I think it's very important that you sit in the table, because if you join to the European Union 28-30, you definitely will be parallel to the FP program. Yeah. So I think we have to think how to include you, and this is why this session happens. Monica, you wanted to come?
Yes, I wanted to say something about the teachers and speaking about something very concrete, which are the salaries of those teachers or professors in the universities and researchers, because of course in many of, if not all of the widening countries, the salaries are very low. And like I used to say, I say hello to Stefan Weyers from the Commission, who was my counterpart when I was at Costa. I mean, if those researchers have to come to Brussels for whatever meeting or for, I mean, if they come to do a peer review, they will be paid by the Commission correctly. But if they come by their own to meet with other, to build, for example, a collaborative project, the single travel from, let's say, Bulgaria to Brussels costs 3 times the salary they get. So we have to be aware about this kind of things. So that's also then a challenge to motivate new generations to enter the research careers or the professor careers, because it's not very easy also from a personal point of view. And like Jean-Pierre said, I mean, many have to do another job at the same time to get a more or less correct, let's say, revenue in their lives. That was one point I wanted to say. And the other point I wanted to say is about budget. Again, of course, it's in the interest of the whole Europe, and it was also said by my neighbors from the right, is that those countries also grow, because the more their economies will work correctly, the more they will be able also themselves to contribute to the European global budget and consequently to the framework program. So it's in the interest of everybody, and of course research and development is essential for growing economies wherever they are in the world.
Thank you, Monica. Yeah, just very short, because we have a question. Yeah, so.
If you have a response on the same topic.
If I do, I was just adding a point, very actually practical, sort of touching upon the building of capabilities that we heard across the panel, and the responsibility that we have, right, like towards the enlargement or the widening, as it is called. Cyber attack. I mean, you know, these countries, after the Russian invasion, we saw like an increase in the region of cyber attacks. I mean, if we don't equip the region and harmonize the technical capabilities and capacities, really, of the region with Europe, what we already have in place, then we have a problem, right? We are at risk as well. So this is a very concrete example that it comes to my mind if we think if we are happy or not to have this country in Europe. I would say the answer is there.
Thank you. So you have a question?
Denise Alaidin from Eureka. I actually had a question, and I was hoping to get your views on this idea of innovation valleys. So essentially using regional or building on regional leaders to essentially pull up entire regional ecosystems towards European or even global innovation, and whether you think that could be the way forward as well.
Perfect question for Jose. I think that, Jose, you are the right panelist to respond to this.
I was
There is-
recovering your question and link to this. It's clear for me that in what comes research and innovation, there is a regional dimension that is very important. So there is a regional dimension, there is a national dimension, and there is a European dimension. And sorry, it's complicated, but if you really want to do it properly, we have to look at the three dimensions. If you are talking about large-scale research challenges, this cannot be done at regional level. So this should be dealt at European level. But as I said before, then drilling down to take full advantage of the benefits of the investments that are doing at European level forced us to act at regional level. Because as I said, if there is a research results from a European project that was applied in the automotive sector, but this is relevant for my region where we have a very strong furniture sector, this has to be, the identification of the opportunity and realization of the projects needs to be done at regional level. So that's for me, it's clear. So for me, this dimension of the regional innovation valleys is very important. It applies. It can be regional or trans-regional, so meaning regions with common interests. But we have to complement with that. To work really well, you should complement with that, with the connection to what we are doing at European level that is relevant for that dimension. So I'm a very strong supporter of acting at this, let's say, at least two levels. So which means always to think about it, what kind of synergies, of kind of efficiency we can get from doing things at European level. But then the realization should, in many cases, has to be operationalized, has to be implemented at regional level. Saying this, we have to be careful because sometimes people tend to confuse this with something else, which is I define initiatives at European level, and then the regions follow up. Sorry, that's not the proper way of doing it. If you want regions to be involved, to co-fund, regions, when I mean region can be countries. If you want to be involved, to co-fund, for example, European partnerships, they should have a seat there. They should be heard. I know sometimes it's not difficult, it's not easy because there are many, but get representatives, find a way, but you cannot, it's not fair, it's not possible, it doesn't work to define things at European level and then hope that the regions with their funds, structural or others, will contribute for that agenda. So they have to be there. And this links me, just to conclude, with the instruments and with the funding. We have to remember that structural funds were not foreseen for science and research. They're foreseen for infrastructure. That's what the name comes from. It's the use of structural funds for research and innovation is rather recent, but 15 in large scale, 15 years. 2014, or even a bit before. So we have to remember that the mentalities, the systems, the regulations, everything is formatted not for science and innovation. And these takes time to change. And I have to recognize that, in the last years, the recognition and the reaction from, for example, DG Regio, but also DG RTD, because there was two completely separate DGs, and now they are really working together. I can testify that. And there is really step forward in terms of this alignment, this complementarity between the two DGs and also DG Comp. And this has to be recognized because, let me give an example. In Portugal, if a company, an SME, wants to have a European project, participation in European collaborative research project, in a Eurostage project, and in a net project, and in a national funded project, all of them R&D projects, the same type of R&D, they have to follow 3 different rules for the same thing, and all of them fund with money coming from Europe. So it makes no sense. There should be an harmonization of regulations for the same type of activities. At least the money that comes from Brussels should have an harmonization of regulations for the benefit of all of us.
Thanks, Jose. We have one more question, very quick and very quick response. Can you speak?
change. We have done it. It's possible. It's a lot of work, but the results are excellent. We brought in Harvard, we brought in Princeton, these two universities, with possibilities via European companies. What's foreseen in future to bind in the United States and Latin America? This is the next. How do we have it?
And where are you from? Can you?
I'm from Austria. I'm representing the National Science University, and we have really excellent results to bring it in. They came to our campus with the professors, with the students, we finance them, and results are excellent. But this is a small result. How can we find in these, I would say, Western areas, US especially, and Latin America?
So the question is that how the experience from the, I translate, how the lessons from the widening and the enlargement can be translated maybe to the other continents. There is some lessons we can offer from us.
Well, maybe one example I would like to bring here is something which is being developed presently in Sofia as an initiative which initially was really the initiative of a Bulgarian researcher who was working in Switzerland on cybersecurity. The basis for developing this new structure, which is very much geared towards really the training at a high level students, was because definitely Bulgaria still has a very good system of schools, and the competence of students was very high. And one way the structural funds have been used, which is kind of structural funds are not so well known. One of the contribution that Switzerland was giving to the European Union along their payment for their participation in the framework program was definitely to develop some activities towards Central and Eastern Europe. And actually they managed to use this part of this money to develop this new institute, which is, as I meant, institute is not exactly the right word because a lot of it is, as you say, capacity building. But also some companies recognize, because of the quality of the student, that it was a good investment. So it's very interesting to see how this initiative, which now is 2 years old or 2.5, 3 years old now. Of course, the pandemic was a bit of a problem at some point, but is developing. The people who are leading it are absolutely top people. I mean, Martin Vetchev, who is the guy who had this, really has been, well, received 2 ELC grants and really very, very active. And actually, his company was bought by other companies, but he stays in research. He didn't want to go into business himself. But it's very interesting to see in Bulgaria, which is one of the countries which has difficulties, really developing research on its own, although it has capacities, but not so much money. But it was interesting to see whether it's going to be successful. It looks like at the moment it's very successful. I just discussed the issue with Maria Gabriel, who, as you know now, is vice president, used to be commissioner, and she's very much supporting this idea. And really, so I think it's a good example of two things. First of all, that when people leave the country, they don't leave completely the contact with their initial countries. And second, that contribution by a country which is not in the EU, which is Europe, which is Switzerland, can still contribute to an action which is enlargement of the capacities of EU. Still, although it's still used in with an objective, which is a completely European objective. So I think this outside the structural funds, but it's some kind of contribution, indirect contribution to the structural funds that countries which are associated have to give. Norway is also giving money in the same setting, but I must say Switzerland has been doing a remarkable job at supporting research initiatives with the extra money that they were forced to pay. It was not, they were willing to pay it, but it was part of the rule for them that they had to accompany their joining the program by also providing this funding.
Any other question? The last question from the
If I can add as well, like as an example, GEANT has been working for more than 30 years to connect the research and education communities in Europe, but really, because science has no border, we do connect with global partnership as well. So we have connection, literally like pipes and networks, as well with Latin America, thank you, Latin America, the United States, and with Singapore going through London. I mean, I can give you more details maybe offline. But I think that is an example of partnership, right? Like outside Europe.
So virtually, we are much better connected, and fortunately, the research is turning to be virtual, and also open science is happening all around. Any last question from the floor? Yes? Yeah.
Hi, good morning. Doris Alexander, Trinity College Dublin. Perhaps a slightly provocative question. At the moment, we know there are countries that are net recipients, and we know that there are countries that are net contributors in terms of the EU budget. We know a lot of the countries that are net contributors will not want to contribute more. So we also know that some countries across Europe still need to be encouraged about the value of research and innovation. So might it not be the case that we end up with a Framework 10 program with enlargement as part of that, an enlarged set of countries, but also an enlarged set of net recipient countries? And therefore, we may not end up with a hugely bigger budget. And if we end up with a bigger budget, we have to do more with it in terms of widening. So how can we think about widening and enlargement in the context of perhaps not a much bigger budget for FP10? What would we focus on?
Monica, you wanted to
In fact, I want to make a comment and then another one, but which is about another topic. They are net contributors financially, and they are net contributors by people, because the widening countries, they are giving their best people to the net contributors from a budgetary point of view. It's a bit simplist, but somewhere we have to think about that. So we need to find a balance in both, that's for sure. It's not an answer, but it's just a comment.
anyone wish to? Yeah, Jean-Pierre?
Of course, I certainly see your point, and that's what I'm fearing. But if Europe doesn't understand that it needs to invest in research much more than it does at the moment, we're just lost. I mean, that's look at what is the international competition. I mean, this is the reality. So ignoring this is just going directly to the wall. So I think I understand that if you approach this purely as an accountant, you say, well, that's too much. But you should look in the future. That's back to the future. If Europe doesn't understand that it has to put more money into these investments, it's going to be a second-rate group of nations, period.
Monica and Jose wish to contribute,
Yeah,
and
maybe
then
you first, because I will, no, go ahead.
Jose, you are
Because I
coming.
think
I'm the moderator, you are
I
coming.
Since it was a provocative, I will give you a provocative answer also. Well, it's up to the politicians to decide. And it's up to us to vote for the politicians we have. Okay? So if somebody says that, I don't think research is so important because now we have to spend more money in war, now war is priority, well, and by the way, it can also bring research, but that's a bet. And if we, because the budget is limited, we know the resources are limited, so it's a choice. We have to be conscious of the consequences of what we are deciding. And what everybody should be aware, and by the way, I'm fully support that we support Ukraine, so I'm not against that, but we have to take the decisions. We're looking at the budget, like in our houses, we have a budget, we have to take decisions. What we know for sure is that if we spend less money in research than our competitors, in the long term, or by the way, in the mid-long term, it's not long term, in the mid-long term, we will lose. Now, it's decisions. Now, we can invest more in health or more in social security or whatever. What we know is that if we don't invest in research, by the way, all types of research, applied, basic, all the same, we lose. And the second thing that I already said, if we don't count with the entire Europe, with the size of Europe, if we think that we are going to solve this with only half a dozen countries, that instead of putting money in common objectives, we'll keep the money for them and invest themselves, my opinion, we will lose even worse. So now it's up to the politicians to decide, and on us to vote for the politicians, or try to convince them also, of course.
Monica.
Thank you. So it was good that you spoke first, because I can now say that I fully support your position, and we should not forget we are citizens, so we vote. And you have to convince also your families, your friends, the bookseller, where you buy your bread, and so on. So speak around you about science and about the need for money in science and about doing the right votes when the elections will arrive, in particular also towards the European Parliament. So that's one point. The other point I wanted to raise, which is my last one, is impact. It has been mentioned also in other sessions, and I think there is really a huge work to be done at European level. I think it needs really to have specialists thinking about what do we need to measure for what. And I will give an example. Marilyn said this morning, well, we have done a calculation, it needs 11 years to have the first results, the first impact. Well, if the indicator is time to market, yes. But we have so many other kind and sorts of impact. And it was said, I think, by the president of the Max Planck,
yes.
that, for example, educating people and succeeding in educating people, like Jean-Pierre said also, in educating them so that they become good researchers and good citizens and good whatever, that's also an impact of our research activities. So, and there are many others. So I think we should ask the Commission to dedicate much more time on thinking about what do we need to measure, what are the right indicators to measure what kind and type of impact. And of course there is quite a lot of intangible impact, which will only be measured over many, many years of time, so continuity.
So now I have to make a choice and ask you, there is one more question and there is a lunch. Are you agree that we ask for the last question from Magdeburg? Yeah, from the very innovative company? Yes, yes. Yes. Yeah.
How can we maybe with the help of the European money, make sure that these investments are motivated or stimulated on national level?
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. Anyone wish to respond? Jean-Pierre?
We should remind people that the contribution of countries to the European budget is 1% of their national budget. 1%. It's very, very, very little.
Yes.
And so if you realize that the number of things can be actually achieved only at European level, with 1% of the budget, there is no way. In the case of ERC, for example, it's a figure I always keep repeating, because this morning we tend to hear that there was too much money for individual projects. ERC is 17% of the European budget. And now if you go back at what is the weight of ERC in the global research budget in Europe, it's 1%. Come on, I mean,
Thank you.
if you look at what is the competition in China now, we're on a totally different scale. So.
Yeah, so thanks very much. I'd like to say thanks for the panel. I think that we have got a very, very strong arguments. For instance, Jean-Pierre started that none of the member countries making really well. Yeah, so there is the homework to done before to find someone else purse the budget. Yeah, so I think that it's important one. But it's very important that all the European leaders and all the national leaders are wearing now yellow and blue jackets. Just see the parliament sessions. They have the Ukrainian flag everywhere. So we cannot generate expectations on one side and generating hopes, and then to say, okay, you are a recipient country, you do something on your own. We need the talent from the region. We have 4 commissioners or 4 leaders in the European science. Iliana is from Bulgaria. Maria Gabriel is from Bulgaria. Carlos Moedas was from Portugal. Manuel Heitor is from Portugal. So we cannot say that the countries coming from the widening and formerly enlargement countries have not a commitment to lead and inspire the European leaders to spend more on the research in general. So I think that it's proved that the talent is everywhere. And I'd like to give you the last very concrete example. The Nobel laureate of this year, Kariko Katalin, she was never, ever eligible to get any fund from the central, regional, national funders. And she has got a Nobel Prize, and it was many times mentioned that what was the impact. I'd like to add one more element. When she had a free choice, without the economic barriers, she has chosen to turn back to her own country to make her research there. And I think that it's very important to remember that the researchers across Europe, they belong to somewhere. And I think that it's very important that when you go for researchers, you have not to choose between your belonging and between your two belonging, because you belong to research and you belong to somewhere you wish to stay. And I think that Kariko Katalin lesson should be a lesson for us. There are several research now in the United States to investigate that how her research was never ever financed. Yeah, they are running research that how they could miss it. And how many things are missing all over Europe, being a recipient or being a contributor country. What we wanted with this session, that we put into the FP10 discussion, the discussion about the growing Europe, the triple-sized Europe compared to the 20 years ago. Because unless we do that, and unless the researchers take the leadership, we leave it to the politicians. And I think you are right that it has to be a politicians. But the researchers are the most trusted community in the entire European Union. So you have to be absolutely aware what are the real issues to put into the table. Thank you very much.